And this is the iTechGear Weekly, episode number 67. It's a color issue. Recorded live Sunday, November 12th, 2023, live from iTechGear Central. As I said, I am Christopher Spera, the editor-in-chief over at iTechGear.org, and joining us today, way down south, way down in the deep Ohio Valley, Brother Joel McLaughlin. How are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine and really thankful to be here.
Yes. Former contributing writer over at Gear Diary and currently the host of the Linux Link Tech Show and living in the Retro Arcade podcast. Did we get any of those this week?
Well, Linux Link Tech Show, we did. I have yet to record a Living in the Retro Arcade. I may take a week off.
Okay.
Because it's Diwali.
Happy Diwali. It is Diwali.
Yeah,
and to all of our Hindu friends out there, happy Diwali.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which means Joel had to work till 2 a.m. So.
Well, there you go.
That was your contribution to the festivities.
There you go. And feeling festive, of course, as always, former contributing editor over at Gear Diary and Pocket Now, Mr. Chris Gavula. How are you, sir?
Festive or telling those kids to get off my lawn? It's about the same thing.
And last but certainly never, ever least, the former co-owner of WUGNET Publications, Mr. Larry McJunkin. How are you, sir?
I am just fine. And just to be clear, I am 356.7 miles further south than Mr. Joel.
Well, that's true.
Hey, as far as I'm concerned, you're all in the south.
My cohorts on this show are going to love this. I am on day 15 of using an S23 Ultra instead of my iPhone 15 Pro Max, which means I'm one day past the return period, so it's in the books. I am officially on this phone for
I was going to
say,
that means it's only been 15 days of calls and questions we've had from you.
That's right. Well, thank you for all the answers.
So I'm glad to see that we've reached this milestone.
That's true. That's pretty big for me.
That's exciting. That is a big thing.
It is a big thing.
I mean, when you put that tag that says Larry didn't take it back, that's a big thing.
That is a big deal.
Well, congratulations.
Yes. And I bet Mrs. Dr. McJunkin is actually...
Mrs. Dr. McJunkin doesn't really care.
She knows you too well.
Oh, my goodness. And speaking of the Mac M3 Pro...
Speaking of the Mac M3 Pro, because we were...
Speaking of the M3 Pro and the M3 Max MacBook Pro, did you guys know that this thing is supposed to be a desktop class AI monster? Larry,
well, okay.
What is going on with this? Talk to me.
You're not going to like this probably, but I'm going to say it anyway. Yeah. I read not only this article, but I read several very similar articles. My take is right now there are a lot of pundits out there that are pandering to Apple with their comments about the M3 series silicon and its varying levels of insertion wherever into the Apple product line. And yeah, I get it. The M3 is an iterative upgrade. It's a bit better and it raises the bar, but I think it's only raising it by inches, not feet and yards, as some of these folks would have us think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Don't get me wrong. It's a good product. It's a great product. I own it. I don't own the M3. I own the M2 Pro, and it's indelibly changed our industry. It really has.
No doubt there.
I personally think these changes are arriving with less of a performance delta each year. The M1 was a huge jump over the Intel. The M2 was a little bit less.
Which, by the way, was always the same. Same is true with the Intel series chips.
Well, you're right.
Our AMD series chips. I mean, everybody's chips are the same. The big change was when we went to the M1, right? And that was a huge kind of pivotal shift in the industry in a lot of ways.
Oh my goodness. It made my i9 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro with 32 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me kick off some discussion with one more question. I think you'll appreciate this. I think we being the industry can only accomplish so much in a year. If you couple that with the fact that Apple or anyone isn't going to give you the whole enchilada on day one. I mean, Marketing 101 says don't release the M20, do it 1 year at a time so you make cash. So
Right.
they're trying to keep a hand on our credit cards a little bit here. And anybody would do this. I get it. But,
Mhm.
I just felt that the article we're citing, along with all these others, they say the same thing. They're pandering to Apple. I'm sorry. It's a
I think they are.
processor. It's a processor. It's iterative. It's limited by the fact you can only do a tiny performance bump each
Yeah,
year.
well,
Intel, well, you could do more.
Well,
I know. They'll
compared
only
compared
release
to the
more.
M2, yes.
well, the thing
Compared
is,
to the M2, yes. It
you
is
got-
it is very iterative.
But I mean, Intel and Mac are over. They're done. Let's
But-
accept this wonderful engineering marvel as what it is. It's an M series, and to move on. We get
Yeah.
a new rollout or a new chip
I mean,
every
what are
year.
you gonna do? You're gonna potentially, use a thinner process, and you're gonna
Right.
potentially add more cores. That's your two choices at this point. Short of changing the technology. They're not changing the technology, so it's iterative. There's not that.
But most of our
gonna be a small
most of our
percentage.
listeners aren't going to see a bit of difference between an
Mm-mm.
M2 to M3, whatever. They're not.
Or an M1 for that matter.
Right. Thank you,
because,
Joel. You're right.
Well,
You're
yeah,
right.
I mean, the only thing that probably the biggest problem with Apple's latest release has been using 8 gig as a starting memory.
Well, that's an
for
important.
a lot of
That's
these
an
things.
important thing. And well, not just that, Joel, but also the path, the path being halved in size.
That too, yes.
Those two things are going to limit the M3's ability to be faster a little bit. In reality, in real use. I mean,
I would fondly say that the only difference between my current M2 Pro MacBook Pro and my original M1, the only difference is the two machines between them and about $5,000. That's it.
Uh-huh.
True. I would tend to
Yeah.
agree. Somebody with an M1 Max, I tend to agree. I mean, a
For
little bit of
what I use it
specifications, though,
for
first.
anyway.
A little-
Others maybe not, but
Right.
well, I'm at the. I'm not going to say the low end of the M1 chain, but I have the M1 Air, but it was a higher Air. Not the
Sure.
limited processor one that the
Right.
first they came up. But
Right.
the point I'm getting at is I'm still not thinking about getting an M2 or an M3 yet.
yeah, because you're happy with it.
Yeah, I've been very happy with it. It's been a very solid product. It's not slow. It's not laggy. It's not anything at this point. So why change? And I think a lot of people are saying that, right? It's been good. The M's were a big jump for us, but once we made that jump,
huge.
the
Right.
jump between them, it's not. And again, you can look at the benchmarks, and yes, the M2 and the M3 are considerably faster than the M1 on paper. That's true.
Right.
And I say that as a qualified statement. Obviously, there's differences with the pros and the maxes, and there's differences. There's other subtle differences in the different tests that were done. But the point I'm getting at is, so we have that going on, and then on top of that, we have that let's just call them the ex-Apple engineers that are over working for Qualcomm now, that are about to release, their ARM chip.
Right.
That's basically similar in architecture in a lot of ways. Let's just kind of call it what it is, I guess. And that's going to impact this market as well. But it's all going to be kind of more of the same. It's what it is. It's just all good because they're all doing it the same way when you get right down to it. So there you go. I mean, do we get excited because this newest one is only 5% faster than the older one, or whatever the number might be? No, I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. It's iterative.
But for those of you who remember, I don't know if you all do, but do you remember when we moved from into the Intel phase in Apple?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't this smack of that a little bit? It was a big deal.
Well, the jump in, the jump in, the difference there, I think, Larry, is that was call it a software. It was more, yes, it was hardware as well, but it was more of a software change. The bigger deal was that we went from, in the Mac world, you went from the old Mac OS into the OS 10 stuff, right? You went into the whole.
Well, yeah, no, I meant when when Apple very first started using Intel processors.
Right, but what I'm getting at is those two changes happened in a very similar kind of time frame. They happened around, and so it ended up being much more.
But I mean, we still jumped up and down and screamed and hollered and was all happy. And now, I mean, then 3 months later, it was like, okay, where's the next one? We want the next one.
Exactly right. And I think that's where we are here now. I think you're absolutely right. We made the jump into the M series, and now here we are, and everybody's going, why isn't it as big a jump as it before? Well, because you didn't change much. That's why.
Right.
And you're, why are you thinking that you should? They already made the big cataclysmic change. Now we're in the iterative changes. I think we're in a perfectly fine space, and I think you're right.
Yep.
They're good. They're good devices. There's nothing wrong with them. But now we're having two schools of thought. You're right. Either we have these pundits who are talking about, why it's the greatest things in sliced bread, when really it is just a little better than its predecessor. And then we also have a subculture. If you look out there, you're going to see a whole bunch of people going, well, this thing's a piece of crap because it's only a little bit better than the predecessor. Okay, wait a minute. Why is it either or? I don't understand that. It's better. End of story. Move on.
Well, let's also go ahead and talk a little bit of specs here from a processor perspective. You've got either an 8, 11, 12, or 14 core CPU. You've got either a 10, 14, 18, or 30 core GPU. All right. With anywhere between 8 to 128 gigabytes of RAM and 512 to 8 terabytes, gigabytes to 8 terabytes of storage. All right. The article that we are citing in, and that's for the M3 processor, or the M3 Pro or the M3 Max processor, the whole series. All right. The article that we are citing in the show notes, all right, is saying that if you are either a aspiring pro or a pro, all right, the upgrade could be worth it. Could be. All right. But like you guys have been saying, all right, it is an iterative step from the previous processor. What is probably a better examination is from 1 to 3. So from the M1 to the M3, is that worth the upgrade?
I would say it probably is.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people it's going to be, and I think that is the conversation, and maybe that's why Apple tried to push the conversation that way in their presentations. I'm sure, because it's certainly a bigger jump, that's for sure. It's and I think the point is, the other reason is because those of us who bought at least the first generation M1s, whether it's an M1 Air or an M1 Pro, or one of those early on devices, is that our machines are now starting to get to that age where we are starting to think about, okay, what are we going to do next? Right. And I think that's more why that was pushed heavily, because we're getting to that point. The M2s are still too new in people's heads.
Not only are the M2s still new, but the M2 for a long time, all right, and I'm talking at least another 3-4 years, is going to be a really good processor.
Absolutely true. Well, so is the M1.
Even the M1. Even the M1 is going to be a really good processor for at least another 3 years.
Well, I had the M2 Pro, and I guarantee you that the M3 is not on my Christmas list this year. And I'm an adopter.
No, and I don't think that it should be either.
No.
All right. Yeah. Now, from an M, depending on what you're doing, now this all gets back to those wonderful little words, right? Use case. All right. Depending on what you're doing and how much processing power you need. All right. If you're dealing with either high frame rate video, all right. If you are dealing with some really complicated audio or video or graphic renders, then the higher processor or the more powerful processors are going to be of more interest to you. All right. So if you've got an M1 Pro or an M1 Max and you're looking, is it time yet? Maybe not, because the M1s are still very good at what they're doing.
I think there's one other case we need to look at. If you bought an M2 last year and it's got 8 gigs of RAM in it, and you just landed a new job as a video mixer for the Zach Brown band, you need to upgrade. Even if
I would argue, that anyway. I mean, and I was just going to say, Larry, then thank you for kind of going down that path, is that more than getting the faster processor, if you're doing video processing and you're doing audio processing, you're doing those kind of things, kids, RAM is going to be your best friend. You want more RAM.
Yes.
Because the less swapping you, especially now with the M3s, with the smaller data paths, you don't want to be swapping as much. So more RAM keeps you from swapping as often. That's
yes, and that is a good thing to at least mention. All right, is that the memory bandwidth has been cut in half.
Exactly. Well, we did mention that, but yeah, you're right.
All right. Well, to reiterate too, even if we already did
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. It's going to have half the throughput of the M1s and the M2s at a comparable level. All right. The point being is, and Chris, you're dead on. If you're looking for performance and you're going at the M3, even if it's an M3 and just the M3 or an M3 Pro, get more RAM. All right.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And I know we say this a lot on this show. We talk about RAM, but it's really important. I would rather have an M1 with 32 gigs in it than I would an M3 with 8. I honestly would.
Yes.
And I would argue even today, and I don't care if you're on a PC or if you're on a Mac, I wouldn't buy anything less than 16 gig of RAM and anything these days. Even for basic usage, I wouldn't.
Exactly. And if you could get 32, if you could squeak yourself up to 32, I would do that.
And we understand, folks, as we've mentioned this, we know that Apple charges and they charge a premium for it. They get you for it. We know that. But in the end, you'll be happy that you did it.
The machine will last. The machine will go farther for you. You go longer in between your upgrade periods. All right. Which nowadays means, throwing out the machine, selling the machine.
In Apple's defense for charging a lot for their RAM, they claim that their memory modules are not hand selected, but they are vetted in some.
I know they're paired or matched or whatever.
They're better than just picking them up from Crucial at a dime a dozen.
I've read that before from them. I
don't know how that happens, but I'm sure there's truth to it, or they wouldn't say it.
There may be, but I will tell you, it really hurts. All right, especially on their vintage machines, and I say vintage when you could go and get RAM and upgrade RAM on your own. All right.
Yeah, but people have to remember, this is not what Apple uses, and it's fair. I don't want to overstate it too much, but it's true that if they're matching and they're spending some time putting that together and getting the right component, it's not the same as just going down to your local Micro Center and buying a couple of
they don't
commercial modules.
Joe Bob idiot, and they're breaking open that MacBook.
Correct.
When I read an article that says, "Gee, I can get it for $50 down here, and Apple's charging me $200 for it," it's like it's not exactly the same thing. But
not anymore.
But having said that, that, they absolutely are. I mean, do they overcharge for it? Sure, that's part of the premium you pay. We all know that. I mean, if you're in the Apple world, that's how it is. But I don't want to overstate it or understate it. But the point is that it's not the same. And some of these articles like to play like, oh, it's just this $50 module. Well, no, it's not. It's this. It's not exactly the same thing. So stop.
No, I agree.
Stop saying that. But yeah. But it's still a lot. It's still a lot of money.
Agreed.
Well, and
take your cheap RAM and get off my yard.
Yes. But then in another article I read, though, when they were talking about the 8 gig limit, the 8 gig low end ones, how much of an increased write cycles that it does on the SSD, and that is very important.
Yeah,
that's another very important point because SSDs have a limited life. People don't realize that.
That's why it shouldn't be 8 gig anymore. Shouldn't have been that for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I have to agree.
I agree. Well, all right. So to wrap this up, you need to really think about what you are doing, and is what you're being asked to do, or if what you are wanting to do with perhaps upgraded software is now. And only you, the user, can answer this. All right. Is it now taking you too long on your high end M1 machines, your Pros, your Maxes? Is it now taking too long to do the things that you want to do? And too long is subjective. All right. And is it worth the anywhere between $15.99 to $71.99 for the M3 series Pros?
And keep in mind,
order
guys,
to resolve that taking too long.
There are still quite a few. If you go to like even Apple's website and you really want one, there are a lot of refurbed M2s out there still that you can get. So there are some bargains to be had.
And authorized resellers may also have M2.
And you know, I'm not
M1,
plugging
high-end
Apple.
M1s
I'm not pimping
or M2
Apple on
series.
this, but a friend of mine just bought a refurbed M2, which
Yep.
is only like probably a year old, but it's new to him.
Right.
I had no idea what pristine condition these things
They are.
Coming from
bought
Apple.
There's
several.
not a
It's
mark,
just like buying
not
new.
a mark on that machine.
And you have the full
anywhere.
warranty on it when you get it. So
Absolutely correct.
I bought a number of them over the years. Not all of mine have been refurbs, but I bought a number of the refurbs and never been unhappy with the refurb ever.
No, it's actually been, their refurbs are actually very good.
They're very good, and pristine is the word you use. And I have to say that. I mean, it was just like I was getting a new one.
I bet
really
a lot
was.
of them are returns in 14 days, and they just don't want them, or they have buyer's remorse or something.
Exactly. So, I mean, the only difference for me was in most cases it comes in a gray, kind of bland cardboard box rather than
right.
a nice.
It doesn't come
in
in the regular retail package.
That's the only difference. And otherwise, the machine was flawless. I've had very good luck over the years with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's another way to save a couple of bucks. But so again, to wrap it up, check your use case. Is it taking too long? Do you need more RAM? Is it, what is your reason for, and then if you've got the M1 and you're looking at the M3, then I would say definitely yes. If you've got an M2, I would look into, probably trying to stick it out, but that's just me. So your mileage may vary.
That's
absolutely true. And speaking of the Apple Watch Ultra, how do you?
Oh my goodness, there was a
segue.
Bottom line is buy one if you can't walk.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have arthritis, and and I'm pre-diabetic. I'm right in that area where I could lean a little to the right and I would be diabetic, or if I lean a little bit to the left, I'm not quite there yet. And I've got an Apple Watch Ultra too, and I'll tell you what, my stability has not been very good lately. But interestingly enough, there's an article and a report out there that indicates that the Apple Watch Ultra fall detection dialed 911 for a guy that fell over and fell unconscious with diabetes. So this is an interesting kind of thing. A lot of what is going on with there's a couple different features here, and one that we talked about a little bit last week related to the diabetes feature, the glucose detection and measuring, right? He who cracks that nut shall win the smartwatch war, is I think the thing.
Yeah.
He who draws the sword, that sword from the stone will go ahead and shall be king of all smartwatches.
I don't think it's just a smartwatch war. I think it's also would also be the phone war, because especially if Apple is the one that does that,
then they're going to buy an iPhone. You're right.
You're going to have to buy an iPhone.
I'll get stuff. Yeah, true enough.
So I do recall that Apple was originally thinking that the Apple Watch would work with Android, but they stopped going down that road because they didn't want to eat into iPhone sales.
Right.
So there is that, but it's interesting enough that this guy in Las Vegas with type 1 diabetes fell unconscious from low blood sugar and was saved thanks to his Apple Watch Ultra dialing emergency services when the fall detection kicked in. So this guy literally fell unconscious. Apple Watch fall detection kind of kicks in and says, "Hey, I've detected a fall. Unless you do something with the watch here in 5, 4, 3, 2, I'm going to call emergency services." And he did not respond, and therefore the first responders were called, and they came out and they were able to go ahead and revive him. All right. And he was lucky that this feature was there. So, I mean, this is kind of
you know what? I think people take this a little too lightly. Allow me 1 minute here to inject a true story
Please.
because
please.
I've only fallen
Right.
one time in all of my many years, and that's a lot of years. Most third graders can't count that far, but honestly,
Most adults
I-
can't count that far, Larry.
Right.
Bottom line was I'm wearing an Apple Watch at the time about 3 years ago, the front end of the pandemic. I'm carrying a load of clothes in a basket walking into the laundry room. I didn't know that my lovely bride had just set on the floor a case of water from
Ow.
Costco. And I couldn't see it because I'm holding this big basket of clothes. I fell. I mean, I just literally
Ow.
fell.
Ow.
I was like out for a second or two because I hit my head on the wash machine, but I came back to it, didn't hurt myself.
Right.
But my Apple Watch went off. And you know what? That's a good feeling when you see that thing say, I'm about to do something or I'm calling.
Yeah.
And it works. It really works, folks.
It does.
Yep.
It does. I went and made sure that my mother had an Apple Watch with fall detection. She is a heart transplant recipient, and she's also on full kidney dialysis now. So it's something that we want to my sister and I want to make certain that she has, just
Sure.
in case, because my
Right.
sister doesn't work out of the house. She's got, she works in downtown Houston, and of course I'm not in Houston on a full-time basis. So mom's, usually around the house by herself, and if she trips and falls or whatever, and help by falling and I can't get up, her Apple Watch is going to go ahead and
Yep.
call. All right.
I wish
Now,
some of the other smartwatches would adopt that feature.
And here's something else to think of too. I have one of my favorite YouTubers is her trail name's Dixie. She was originally she is a Triple Crown holder of long distance hiking in the United States. That means she's hiked the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the
Nice.
Continental Divide Trail.
Nice.
Okay, she was recently on a hike. And she had recently also been diagnosed with sleep apnea. This chick is a skinny girl. Okay, so I mean, and so she started feeling not so great on her latest hike, and her Apple Watch. Now here's something Apple Watch doesn't have yet, but it did tell her Apple Watch told her her heart was in an AFib. All right, so and she was feeling miserable, so she had a Garmin Reach. She nailed that SOS button, and they came in with a helicopter and lifted her out.
Nice.
All right. Unfortunately for her, that cost a lot of money, medically wise. But it saved her life.
But you can do that on an Apple Watch Ultra now with the satellite connectivity.
Now you can.
You
can. There you go.
But fall detection, right? Now, this guy in Las Vegas that is the so the precursor or the basis for this discussion isn't 55 yet, and this guy, I mean, fall detection isn't on for those folks that are under 55. All right. In this case, he turned it on. All right, by himself. All right, and it actually saved his life. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting to do this, all right, Apple fall detection is available on Apple Watch SE and Apple Watch Series 4 and later, or Apple Watch Ultra and Ultra 2. All right. And those who want to turn it on or check it to see if it is enabled need only to go to their Apple Watch, tap the emergency SOS, and then select the toggle for fall detection and tap always on if you want to turn it on, if it isn't already. So this is something that, for those of us that need something like that, just in case, it's not a bad idea. So interesting when technology can actually do something like this and actually save your tuchus. So
true.
And it's you can do that from your iPhone as well, folks. So in the settings in your iPhone as well.
Right. Yep.
For those of us who like the bigger screen to read things.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So, but I want to go ahead now and move us to our mobile Linux segment. And I want to really go after. And Larry, you've been having some issues, and I know these are going to be real quick, and that's cool. But you've been having some issues with Google Calendar on your brand spanking new Galaxy S23. What's going on with Google Calendar on your phone?
Well, it's the 23 Ultra, but I imagine it'd be the same thing with the 23. And this is sort of where our show title came from. It is a color issue. If you think about this, when I get done, it'll make sense. I first stumbled upon this problem. I figured, oh, it's just a quick fix. I'll go in settings on my Android phone, on this S23. I'll change the color. Anyway, bottom line was this whole mess turns out that there's obviously a little bit of a backstory here that maybe Google doesn't want us to know. So even though I use a Mac, I use Google Calendar on my Mac, PC, iPhone, and Android because it just works. I like it. It's a good calendar. It's just works for me. But recently I noticed that the birthdays calendar, which pull from my contacts automatically in the Google contacts, was colored seafoam green. Well, other than not liking seafoam green, it's not what I had as the previous color. I had it checked as graphite. And I looked on all the other devices, it was there, graphite. Only the Android was wrong. So I changed it. About 30 minutes later, I looked at it, it's back. Seafoam green. I did it about 10 more times, nothing. It'll change for 30 minutes and it rolls back to seafoam green. So I said, well, this is kind of goofy. So I went out and started looking on every forum thread. I looked on Reddit, I looked on Quora, I looked on especially Google community forums where you'd think I'd find an answer. And I found over 20, I want to say 22 different instances of users reporting this same issue as a start of a thread in Google support community forums. Got off instantly. No, not even the second response, not even a me too, nothing. They shut the thread off. And why they didn't kill it, I don't know, but they didn't. They left it, but it's still shut off. I have no idea what to make of this. My problem still exists. It obviously exists for others. It's obviously also not a big deal. We have 2 or 3 people on the show here that are not experiencing the problem. But I mean, I don't particularly want to look at a green. I have a lot of calendars, and I need to color code them for my use case. And seafoam green is not in the picture, but right now it is. So there's no fix to this. I mean,
so apparently you have no choice.
I have no choice. So it's not a big deal, but yeah, it is for more of a reason than just my problem. Why is Google hiding this to me? That's an issue. I don't know.
I hear you. And I can understand, how that may be.
I'll live through it. It's a first world problem. I know.
Right.
Still.
So yeah, I don't understand. Why Google is like that.
And trust me,
I've
ripped this thing off of my computers. I've ripped all Google Calendar off of everything, reinstalled them all. Same thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I don't understand why they're they just close their ears and no, I can't hear you. I can't
hear you, can't see you. But they're not the only one that does that either, Chris.
That's absolutely true.
That's true.
Apple's good at that too.
Let's be clear.
Apple comes up with a fix. They won't answer the question. The hue and cry is fix this. They say nothing. All of a sudden you wake up, it's fixed. Google don't fix it. Doesn't fix it. That's the difference.
Fair enough.
True. I do think though that I find it very frustrating that you can go out and see all those issues and problems and whatevers, and see that you're not the only one that's having it, but they've shut the thread down.
Yeah, but how much technology does it take to color code a calendar? I don't. It's not a.
And why?
Rocket science.
So watch. We're gonna do a documentary, and you're gonna see there's a lot of little elves in the back or something, that are making the toys, right?
That's right. Well, you know what? If you want to hear more about it, stay tuned on iTechGear or on iTechGearWeekly.org because we're going to have an article on it.
There you go.
I'm not giving up.
And that's what I want to make sure that everybody knows and understands. We are gonna talk about this at least a little bit. despite what Google wants or doesn't want from us. We are going to talk about this and see what we can come up with in terms of the hows and whys and whatnots, and see if we can't get some folks to give us some insight.
Anyway,
for right now, it is what
To
it is.
top all of that off, I just checked
So
this
hopefully,
evening,
so
and
hopefully
I
you
didn't
guys,
have the problem.
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
I know.
but hopefully we'll have something on the site in the coming week.
Sure.
Or very quickly,
Whatever we see.
and that'll help us figure it all out. Hopefully, maybe, on the Galaxy series phones, with the release of Android 14 and the One UI 6 rollout that's supposed to be starting, Larry, maybe there's a resolution.
Well, I haven't looked today, but after the show I will, and I'll tell folks about it in the article. I really haven't looked today, but that's a good point.
But isn't Android 14 and
true.
One UI 6 beginning to roll out?
Yesterday, Samsung began rolling out Android 14 and One UI 6 to all of its quote flagship phones, unquote. With others, they say to follow shortly. So I just recently switched to that S23 Ultra. And I think Chris Spera also has a 23 Ultra. I don't know if anybody else in the show does.
I do.
Okay, Chris, both Chris's. And no, even though I've been an iPhone user forever, I'm not new to Android. I've had several Android phones, but this is my first true flagship phone from Samsung. And I'll have to admit, I'm actually very, very pleased with it. I've only had one toe in the Galaxy ecosystem, and even then for only 2 weeks now. So I'm not really totally up to speed on One UI, but I'm acclimating to it, and maybe the other two Chris's have some more experience related or flavored comments about all of this. But I'm loving. I do see a huge difference between 14 and 13. Big difference.
Yes, to me, the difference appeared to be minimal.
Well, for you, they would have been because you've been playing with the beta all along.
And I've been on the beta, but what I'm saying is, from going from 13 to even the betas of 14, I mean, they're nice updates, but they were mostly minor tweaks to me.
Well, also, I've only been playing with 13, but for 2 weeks. So for me,
good point.
It's not iterative. It's just all.
But I've not received the final One UI 6 yet.
Weird.
I'm still on the beta. So I read these dates and I go, yeah, these dates are crap, because it doesn't seem to ever impact. They never seem to impact when I actually get it. So, and I'm manually hitting it saying, hey, is there an update? Is there an update? Yeah, no. Maybe it's got tired of me going, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Don't make me turn this smartphone around.
Maybe that's what it is.
Don't make me turn this smartphone around.
Yeah, I think more than anything, Chris, I'm seeing Android for the first time in the last 2 weeks than when I saw it back with the Edge 7. So it's a long road
I would argue most of the major changes came in 13. What you're in terms of the visual, in terms of the UI interchanges, I think you saw a lot of changes at that point. And from Samsung's perspective, in One UI 5, that's where you saw a lot of the changes come. To me, One UI 6 has got some nice tweaks. Android 14 has some nice tweaks. And there's no question there are improvements over 13, but I wouldn't call them major. It's kind of like
maybe you can answer this question. Maybe I don't know if this is an improvement or if it was also on 13, and I don't remember. But earlier, like years earlier, you could not turn off the One UI components. You had to keep them turned on. But now there's a little button that if I go to like the One UI calendar, Samsung calendar, I can't uninstall it, but I can disable it and it's totally gone. It's not in my picture ever again. Is that new or has that been around?
No, I think you've been able to for a while, and I don't know when. Because to be fair, Android One UI 5, Android 13 was kind of where I came into that boat.
Okay.
But it seems to me that that's been an option for a while.
It just seems like a kinder, gentler Samsung. They're trying to.
Yeah, you can't get rid of the apps, and there are still some things that you have to load through their store, and I don't understand why apps that I've had in the Google Play Store all of a sudden have to come out through the
I've only
Samsung.
ran into
I don't know
one.
what it is, but I've
Correct.
got probably maybe a dozen that do that. And it's fine. It's just a little bit of a nuisance because now if you update a phone or if you update apps, I now have to go to two places to update apps. I have to go to the Google Play Store and I have to go to the Samsung Store to do it. It's a little bit of a nuisance, but it's not a major deal. And quite frankly, I like some of the Samsung apps quite a bit. I like the Samsung Mail app. I like their Mail app, for example. I love their Mail app. It's a very nice basic, basic function Mail app. I like the Samsung Notes app. Chris, you and I have talked about
I use
that with
the Notes
pen.
app a lot. I really do.
Their Notes app with the pen is a very nice mix of things.
Yeah.
It really is. So that's why I was always so disappointed when they didn't release the Fold with the pen, because the Notes app is great, but without the pen, it's not quite as nice. And so, you kind of wish they had included that, all embedded like they should have.
Yeah. I thought that the pen was going to be a little bit of just trickery and I'd get over it. But, I actually use that thing.
It has gesture support too. It has a bunch of things. It's actually interesting.
Yeah,
it's an interesting implementation. It really is. They've tried to make it do lots of things. But having said that, 14 is nice. OneUI 6 is nice. A lot of the changes are little interfacey kinds of changes as far as I can tell, but I find them all very pleasant. I mean, it's, I'm not entirely into this whole Material U kind of approach that Google has taken the last couple of versions. It's okay in some cases. It's nice in other cases. It's like, it didn't improve anything in other cases. Take it for what it is.
The font base in Material U is the biggest reason that I moved from the 15
and
Pro Max.
It's definitely an improvement over what they had. I don't know that I like.
It's a beautiful font.
I don't know that I like it better than what's in the 15 Pro Max. To me, they're different in different ways, and they excel in different places in the OS.
And it means a lot if you're nearsighted versus farsighted. I mean,
and I am nearsighted, so
and I'm farsighted, right?
So it does. You're right. It probably does make a big difference. I prefer fonts with serifs. The tails. I actually prefer that, and interfaces tend to not. You like to use those, and that's a problem.
I'm the opposite.
Yep, but the point is, they look good. It looks good. It's a clean looking interface. To me, I make it akin to when Apple went to iOS 7. That was the same kind of cleanup at that time. It's very visually very similar, guys. It's very similar.
I think Google is hamstrung a little bit when they put their apps on an iPhone. Like if you will. Joel, I'm sure, has had the same experience. If you'll look at Google Home on an iPhone and then look at Google Home on your Android phone, it's night and day, totally different.
Sure,
it is,
and it's not Google's fault. Apple says you will develop in Swift, and that's it. So
but the point is, they could adjust for that better than they do. They don't do a great job of adjusting for it. So it is Google's fault, but it is Google's fault as much as it is Apple's. For the way that they've chosen to do it, because there's other apps that are not Google apps that look great on an Apple phone. So take it. So I blame both sides for those. They just don't want to compromise. That's what it comes down to.
Right.
And that's a good point. They don't. All right. They don't want to compromise.
We've been there, done that with these big companies for years, haven't we? I mean, many times. But at least they're not scamming us. They're telling us what's going on. But sometimes people do get scammed, don't they, Chris?
Sometimes they do. All right.
Yes,
and I know that Brother Joel has seen some things that are going on eBay that are just kind of not so kosher.
Funky.
Yeah.
So Joel, why don't you bring us up to speed? What are you seeing and what's going on?
So what I'm looking at here is we recently talked about, in fact, I'm still waiting on mine to get here. We launched the Raspberry Pi 5. We talked about, I think last week on the show, that we were seeing people selling the Pi 5 for up to 109% above the device's MSRP.
That's sad.
Right.
It's worse than that.
And wrong. Totally wrong.
It's really worse than that. The one I found about and put in the article, there was a person on eBay selling the board plus the power supply plus the case and all official Raspberry Pi things about $107 worth of stuff for $499.
See, now
And
that is
somebody will pay
just
it.
so not cool.
And unfortunately, yeah, now you go and look on eBay site, and technically, yes, this is against eBay policy.
Right.
All right. But then I tried to go search, how can I report this to eBay? And I go and follow their policy, and there's nothing in there about price gouging. So eBay's literally just paying mouth service to this.
They're condoning the actual effect.
Yes, and it's not just the Raspberry Pi 5 either. Anytime a game system comes out, you're going to see this commonly. And I got to go beat a cat. He just opened my mini fridge. I'll be right back.
Welcome, folks, to live podcast.
There you go.
That's right.
Oh my goodness!
Oh,
but
that's
I do
funny.
think, but he's right. I mean, these things are completely ridiculous that some people will do when something's in short supply or we're waiting on it and we're anxious and we're tech guys and we don't know how to be patient sometimes.
Yep. Well, it's not just that too. I mean, we're rolling into the holiday season, and when these game systems or new electronics come out, like the Apple Watch 2, or the iPhone 15.
I didn't go through this years ago with Cabbage Patch dolls and the Christmas gift was, and everybody went bananas trying to buy them, and then the online prices went through the roof. I think it feels like the same kind of stuff, and it's just not right that people. I mean, this whole scamming.
It's like hand sanitizer at the front end of the pandemic.
Exactly, or toilet paper.
That was awful.
Toilet paper at the start of the pandemic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I paid like $20 for a little thing of hand sanitizer.
Yeah, everybody went through this, but it's like it's just. I mean, I understand it's hard to stop this kind of thing, but you're right. But Joel, when the platform doesn't,
they don't even allow you to report it. That's
right.
My biggest beef here. They say it's against their policy, but then you go in and try and report it, and you can't. I mean, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I agree.
And folks like us, hey, we know better. All right. You want to get a Raspberry Pi 5, go to SparkFun, go to Adafruit, go to anybody that the Raspberry Pi.org tells you sells them. They're officially licensed partners. And right now, I guarantee you, they're all out of stock right now. Otherwise, I'd have mine. But
right. From a general perspective, though, all right. If you're looking for something, and it doesn't matter what it is, it could be toilet paper or hand sanitizer at the start of the pandemic, or it could be the Raspberry Pi 5.
Yeah, Turbo Man. There you go.
It could be the Cabbage Patch Kid doll or whatever it is. All right. If you know what it should cost, and somebody is charging 3 and 4 times that, and you don't want to pay it, then don't.
The thing is, if you don't buy it, then you're not supporting the scalpers, and they'll go away eventually.
Right. Eventually, those prices will come back down.
We get the urgency. We get the sense of urgency that you have. We all understand that,
but don't.
We know it's easy, and we know it's easier to say than do sometimes. But the reality is, if you do cave to it, all it does is encourage them the next time. And
that's right.
We need to just say no and do something different until it comes, because it'll come back around.
Nancy says, just say no.
Just say no.
Just say no. Yeah.
Kids, don't do drugs. No, don't do eBay.
Just say no.
Gosh, it feels like that sometimes. But
it does.
It's bad enough that I don't want to sell anything on eBay anymore, because the last time I sold something, they had made a change in policy. It said that I cannot get my money until the person who bought it received it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
well, and
I'm not. I don't care what's happening. If that's the way that eBay is working now, I don't get my money until the person receives whatever. That's
it's actually worse than that. Receives it.
I think they even have to be happy before.
Right.
Well,
they have to be happy too. Right.
And Chris, you and I have talked about that eBay tends to favor the buyer. So the
Yeah.
seller can potentially get screwed on eBay. And so I there are some things that they do that I understand why they do, but there's things that they do that I don't agree with.
Right.
Or I wish there was some sort of remediation process you could go through or something, but they don't always have them the way they should, I would argue.
No,
or as good
they
as they
don't.
should be. So guys, just be out there, just be careful. As you do things, you buy things, as you sell things, just be careful.
Right.
Yeah. See, from my perspective, no offense, but I'm not sending a doggone thing to anyone until I've got money in hand, until I have some leverage that I'm not going to get taken by some moron who's just,
And it's happened to you, it's happened to me.
Absolutely.
And, we've been down those paths before. And you just got to be careful out there, like anywhere else.
Absolutely.
It won't happen to you if you buy Lenovo's new X1, though.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. And such a segue. Thank you, Mr. Dr. McJunkin, for the awesome segue.
Into our Windows segment.
Yeah,
right into our Windows segment.
Yes.
Just dumped us right in there. Thanks.
That is true. That is true. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. But Lenovo's X116 Fold is now available. And Chris, this is the one that, unlike our yoga books, which are very much like the Surface Duos, if you will, but in laptop size, right? With two screens. This is more like the Samsung Fold, right? Or the Google Fold, but in laptop size.
Yeah,
right?
and there's an HP that just came out or is just coming out that's also a foldable. This is the latest thing,
Yep.
So we have two different kind of streams coming out right now. One is these foldables that are the foldable screen, very much like the foldable phones, but laptop size. And then we have the dual screen devices.
Right.
And the Yoga Book is really a dual screen device.
It really is a dual screen device.
Can act very much like a single screen device if you want it to, but it mostly acts, but it's mostly acting like dual screens. And you really, this gets back to my favorite phrase. Thank you, Mr. McJunkin. Here we go. Is the use case.
Yes.
There are different uses for those two different kind of approaches. And this used to be, Chris and I you and I used to talk a lot about the Surface Duos versus the Galaxy Folds when the Folds were new.
Yep.
And the difference, and there's different ways to do it. So if you wanted to do something, I'll give you a good example. If you wanted to do something like reading your Kindle book stuff on it, a dual screen is a better approach for you because it behaves better like a normal kind of book.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing something where you're doing like a big layout, hey, sometimes you want that big screen, or if you're watching a movie, you want that single big screen, not two dual split screens. It depends
this is
on what
like
you're doing.
a big giant iPad that folds in half.
Exactly right.
This is like a 16-inch iPad that folds in half.
So these are all starting to come, and they're all starting to show up somewhere in that 2K price point.
Right. This is all right. So the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 Fold was announced about a year and a half or so ago.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago. Yeah,
right. It was probably in the latter half of 2021. All right, or early 22. Right, somewhere around there. Rumors started to come around, and then it was announced, and then we've been waiting. So this thing is now available, and Lenovo was pretty good about.
And I should say we were waiting for the Yoga books because they were out, and then then there was a brief shipment of them, and then they disappeared for a few months.
Yes,
and then they came back.
Yes,
so
same kind of thing here, right?
Yep,
where it was announced, and then it didn't quite. There was a couple of them, or just a very short,
just a
small
handful
batch
of them. Yeah,
small batch, and then they kind of disappeared, and now it's out. All right, it's available for about $24.99. All right, so somewhere in the $2,500 range. All right, and then it's a 16-inch screen, right? A 16.3-inch foldable OLED display, 600 nits. All right, which is pretty bright for a laptop screen. It'll come with up to 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. All right. It's got Intel vPro 12th generation Intel Core U9, i5, and i7 processors, and looks like what it's somewhere in the neighborhood of, or with storage, up to 1 terabyte worth of Gen 4 SSD storage. All right, so it's got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports for expansion. All right. And a couple of cameras. So
Lenovo's very good about coming out with a variety of devices in a variety of kind of formats, and seeing what sticks to the wall. So there's often a little bit of kind of weird custom software with their stuff. That allows it to do the things it does. You got to take it all with a grain of salt. But if you're looking for something different and you want that kind of level of support, I'll tell you what, Lenovo gets it. You know, they certainly do offer that stuff to you.
Good company, I think.
Yeah. And I don't have to put up with this stupid little thumb twiddle thing in the middle on Lenovo's that I've got.
That's true. So unfortunately,
some people now, some people don't.
Unfortunately, right now, this little bad boy is out of stock at Lenovo.com.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
It's a good thing.
You've got to strike while the iron is hot. But
you and I both have the yoga books and love them. You know,
though they are totally awesome. All right, they are totally awesome.
I'm actually talking on this now, and I'm looking at the screen. On one screen, I've got our spreadsheet, and on another screen, I've got our Zoom, and I'm so I'm just it works extremely well.
Cooking
with gas, and I didn't need to carry an external monitor or anything. I just
and that's what's kind of cool about that. You do have more than one screen. So the only thing that I can say is, if you are interested, Lenovo's got some really cool form factor, new different kinds of things that come around. They do a lot of experimental form factors or new sort of concepts.
They do.
Watch the sites. There may be something cool and exciting coming to a web page near you. So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, that's it. So one of the things that I think is kind of cool, though, as part of our Windows segment, and Microsoft's been doing a lot with extending their support. We talked a week or so ago about some Surface devices that are getting extended support and extended firmware support for a total of, I believe, 6 years. Microsoft here is saying that Windows Server 2012, which is nigh on to 10 years old, is getting extended support. And
it went end of life in October.
Yeah.
So,
but it's getting extended support. So, Joel, what's going on with this?
Yes, they're gonna need to sit up a bit. So, Microsoft is extending the ESUs for another 2 years, I think.
Okay.
Till 2026 on the extended security updates year 3, and these are not free.
I was going to say you got to pay, surely.
So the thing that's important, guys, when Microsoft ends of life a server product, especially those of us who are in corporate world, you often are not ready to end of life it. Businesses are very slow about this stuff. What Microsoft offers is this thing called an ESU, as Joel just said, that basically gives you security patches, not anything else.
That's
No
new
not bug
functionality.
fixes, no new functionality, no new bug fixes. It's really just security patches so that you keep so they keep up on updates and vulnerabilities and things like that. And normally it extends about a year. So now they're going to extend it for 3 years, and that's a big deal, guys.
Are the ESU prices are they seat based, or are they just one time price for if you own the server, or what?
That's a very good question.
I mean, if somebody had 5,000 seats, would an ESU cost
it's more It's more complicated than that. If I remember correctly, it's usually based around number of processors in the server, because this is the server product we're talking about. And then on top of that, if you're running SQL on it, there's additional fees, I believe, that go into that, related to supporting SQL Server. So there's a variety. It's a complicated kind of model, and you actually have to, if I remember correctly, the best way they want you to do it is you drive it through an Azure account. So
correct.
Some complications.
Create an Azure virtual machine, and then you will get these updates for free.
Okay.
For the 3 years.
Well, it's got to be a moneymaker, because I'm going to bet that
it is
75% of the 12 servers out there are running SQL. Number one,
We've got a host of that. where I'm at,
Absolutely.
I mean, we're running
know.
them all in AWS, and there is currently a project to migrate them over, but it's
Yeah.
just gonna take a lot of time because each client has
Exactly.
like 10
And plus,
servers.
planning nightmare too.
You know,
I
this,
mean,
and again,
Yes.
I realize that not all our audience is in that kind of, worrying about what happens in the enterprise space. But I'll tell you what, guys, if Microsoft, as Chris kind of said at the beginning of this, they've extended some support in their consumer space on their devices, and now they're doing it here as well. Microsoft has had a long history of extending support on things that they thought they could get rid of, but they couldn't get rid of yet because not enough people were ready to go. I went through this cycle with Windows Server 2008 just a few years ago,
Yep.
and now going through it with 2012, and it's
that's
it's
not
nice
a
to
bad
see.
thing, though.
It's
I mean,
expensive.
it
It's
helps
not cheap,
people out.
but it's nice.
No, but and as you guys said, these are ESU stands for extended security updates.
Yes, it does.
And the original release just expired about a month ago. All right, in terms of support, went from October 30th, 2012 to October 10th, 2023. All right. ESU 1 will go from October 11th, 23 to October 8th, 24. ESU 2 goes from October 9th, 24 to October 12th, 25. And then ES3, which is the final ESU available for this, is goes from October 15th, 2025
So you
to
just
October
buy
13th,
what you
2026.
need, basically.
So my point, guys, is
Yes.
that although a lot of our listeners are probably more consumer based side of things, this can affect them as well. So this is good stuff to do, and to know that Microsoft is doing this and this is their approach to things.
Right.
It's a good thing. It really is a very good thing.
I think it is.
It is.
It's a really good thing.
Not too crummy at all.
No.
But you know what I found that was somewhat crummy.
That was crummy. Yeah.
It was crummy.
Well, it
We
was.
still remember it being crummy.
We do, because unfortunately, the lawn may be dying, but the memory of the footprints is not. All right.
Oh gosh.
In other words,
the memory, the footprints were on my butt as they pushed us out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that being Windows Phone. Chris, you and I have been big involved into not only Windows Phone, but Pocket PC and Windows Mobile.
Well, that's kind of how we got into a lot of this space in the first place,
absolutely.
isn't it? At least into talking about it publicly anyway. That's where we kind of stepped
that's
in the
kind of
door
where
a lot.
we cut our teeth in some respect. And you recently went back through your gadget drawer or closet or thing, and you found some very interesting devices. What did you find?
I actually have quite a few older Windows phones. I tried a lot of different models when they were out, and even Windows Mobile before that. So excuse me, Pocket PC before that.
Yeah.
To be fair, and I was always fascinated, especially when they made the leap from what was Pocket PC into Windows Phone and Windows Mobile, which became the tile-based interface that became the basis for Windows 8. And then Windows 10 kind of continued that model. And it was one of those things. It from a technological standpoint, there was no reason it should have failed. It really all the reasons it failed were almost entirely commercial, not because people weren't interested, but because the way Microsoft supported it or didn't support it is similar to how they support a lot of things. They didn't put quite enough into it, and they didn't make the deals that they needed to make for it. And so things would happen, like, for example, a new device would be available, or a new version of the OS would be available. And for a couple of weeks, you'd see it in your phone store, and then the phone store would push it into the back of the store.
Right.
And they wouldn't push it. They'd push the other devices.
Right.
Why?
Because unfortunately, Microsoft would not put their whole foot in. They took their whole foot out. Right.
Well,
they didn't put their whole foot
think,
in and turn themselves about is the problem.
Hey, Chris G, didn't Compaq have a hand in that? Microsoft put a lot of eggs in the Compaq basket.
Well, and of course, there's a whole thing about why they ended up buying Nokia. If you guys do some research on Google, you'll see this whole history as to why they ended up with Nokia. Right. And the Lumia series, and why they went in all wholesale on Windows Phone at the time. And there were a lot of there were a lot of games going on there.
There were.
Quite honestly, they couldn't make deals with Google. Google just was not having it. That people would release sort of something that worked with YouTube, and Google would block it. There was lots of things like that going on.
Yep.
And yet Google apparently, supposedly, the story is they had a YouTube client, but they wouldn't release it. Things like that were always going on. And those are the kinds of stories. And you keep wondering, well, gee, had Microsoft just made a deal to say, hey, Google will put your search engine on, because Bing was nothing at the time. They would have said something like, hey, let's put it on here, and you give us maps, and we'll put your search engine on or something. Maybe, I don't know. I'm speculating. Had they made so there's a lot of reasons, a lot of things going on. So for folks like myself, we get nostalgic about it. You see stuff, even on YouTube today, you see bloggers talking about how to keep it working in 2023. It does come back every now and then. And I think the big news is, and I think the big reason people are talking about it again, especially right now, is it was the interview recently with
Satya,
with Satya, where he basically said that was his biggest kind of regret, I guess, that they let it go.
They said he said it was, and I quote, a strategic mistake, unquote.
Yeah, and I think had they just done, I don't think they had to do a lot, and we were saying that even at the time. They didn't have to do a lot more. It was just a little more. And so the problem that people were running into is, maybe I have 50 apps on my phone. I'm, making that up, of course, but maybe I have 50 apps on my phone, but that one thing that I need isn't there. If they just put some effort down those paths, it would have been fine. You didn't need.
Well, you said that
5 million apps.
One of you said that it makes we get nostalgic and talk about all this stuff. But I'll tell you what, for those of us and anyone who's held an Apple Newton, if they've held the Compact 3630 in their hand and used it, that was an awesome little machine. It was
I'll tell you what.
Well. It was great.
Well, so as Chris said, I have some of these older devices. I have one of the last ones, which was the 950 XL. The Lumia 950 XL. Right. I also have a Lumia 1520. I had the 1020, which is the one that had an amazing camera for the time.
Yeah, they had the big thing on the back.
Yeah,
I had that
big 50 mega or close to 40.
What
50
and at the time, nobody was doing that.
Not even
cameras were not a big thing in phones yet.
Well, like what most cameras had, maybe anywhere between 2 to 5 megapixels.
Right.
So the camera in the back.
And this was a huge, so this was a huge deal. And they were gorgeous. The pictures that came out of it, especially for the time frame, they were just gorgeous.
Yeah.
The device was gorgeous. The screens on a lot of the Lumias were OLED screens. Again, nobody was doing OLED screens at the time. It was a relatively new thing for folks.
Right.
They were just really bright, vivid. The tiles gave you information that you didn't get otherwise. So now what's happened is most of the key stuff still works on those phones. A lot of things don't, like their Microsoft Store doesn't really work reliably anymore, of course. And things like the weather, the tile shows information, but when you go into the tile, you don't get anything. There's things that don't work, anymore. Or
this was the
way of working around.
But
people are still
go ahead.
But people are still maintaining archives, and they're still kind of supporting this thing. There are still people out there using this thing, and the basic phone services work. Outlook works. The Office apps work. They will tie into your. I can get the movies and TV work, and it still recognizes my Microsoft Movies and TV account that I currently use on a device.
If we wouldn't have had these phones back in 2000 to 2007 era, the cellular companies would have never had their integrated mobile telephony. None of this stuff would have ever happened. Because they all started right here.
And at the end of it, when it ended, it was out running Windows 10 Mobile, which has the exact same underpinnings as Windows 10 on the desktop, kids.
Right.
That's important to note. That stuff. So changing apps wouldn't have been a big deal.
Right.
Pardon?
That was what really was cool about the whole thing.
It really was.
Whole interface, and you and I can go on and on.
Oh, and they had desktop. They had this Continuum desktop way before Samsung had DeX. I mean, all these things existed at the time. They were already doing this stuff.
Right.
And it was very, very, very cool. It wasn't perfect. It was early generation on this stuff, but they were doing stuff that nobody else was doing, and I think that
was even coming close to any of
this. And for years, some of that stuff still hadn't been replicated that well. But what's interesting is if you look at what we now call desktop widgets, it's very similar to what tiles were.
Right.
You know, these things are getting to be, you know, you're starting to see these ideas kind of resurgence and they're coming back out again. But I think it makes me think, you know, and even now the hardware runs very well. It's still very fluid and very smooth.
Wouldn't it be cool if Microsoft ever did it again?
I would love if they did it again, but you know, again, unless they put that effort behind it and into it, it's not going to make a difference, right?
No, they probably will never.
I agree, but given that we only have two choices for phone operating systems, you've got either iOS or you've got Android, and that's it. All right.
Yeah.
One UI 6 is really nothing more than a launcher.
Well, and a lot of these, you know, devices that are out there are really launchers on top of like generic Android or generic something out there. I mean, they're all they're really they're the same.
There are others, but they're definitely aren't gonna see the eyes that an Android or an iOS device is. You know, for example, there's the Pine Phone Pro, which can literally run easy for me to say,
easy for you to
desktop Linux application. But here's the problem: is how does a desktop application work on a mobile device? Not very well. And the only people who care about them are going to be Linux hackers and people like that. You know, I am a Linux user, and I would love to have that. We had that Mamo Linux on the Nokia Internet tablets, and the N900, which I briefly got to play with an N900, not with the SIM in it, but I got to play with one, and it was a great device, but it was just far too technical for the normal person.
And the app has to support the form factor, and otherwise it makes it almost impossible to work with it. I mean, I get it. It's the bear dances, but the tutu is really ugly.
That's right.
But that's what it kind of comes down to.
Bear ain't all that good looking neither, but
you know, there you go.
Yeah.
But the fact the bear dances is clever.
The thing though that I would really like to see happen. All right, Satya, you admitted that it was a strategic mistake for you to abandon it at this time. Man, there is a lot of folks out there that would love to see Microsoft come out, not necessarily with a phone, but with an operating system that would offer an additional choice. As long as you got behind it and made it easy for established developers to either port existing apps over or create new apps or both for your phone, boy, it would really be nice to be able to see a third choice. All right.
Yeah. You know what? I would love to see something leverage it. I mean, I would love, you know, I've said this before, and I think in a lot of ways, I say Windows 8 was much maligned because people didn't understand it, and it was trying to be something it wasn't, you know, intended to be. And that interface is what we saw on Windows Phone, or something very similar to is what we saw on Windows Phone. I'd like to see a device. I'd love to see an actual true tablet device that had that kind of the Windows Phone / Windows 8 type of Metro interface on it.
But as a tablet, purely
as a tablet.
The Windows desktop.
Yes.
Get it through your head,
and not
Microsoft.
As heavy as a Surface Pro.
No.
Well, the thing is, the reason why Windows RT failed, and I don't want to take too much time here, but the reason why Windows RT failed, all right, was because Microsoft couldn't get past the Windows desktop.
They could not.
All right. Had they just stuck with that start menu and then launching apps just from that start menu, it would have been fine.
And there's no reason you couldn't.
Desktop.
There's no reason you couldn't. You
exactly.
know, we do it today on tablets, guys. We do it today on tablets without it being an issue. There's no reason they couldn't have done it, but nobody had thought about doing it at the time. And that was the thing. The whole idea was unique and interesting and different. And I'd love to see it again. I think you're right. We would have to get rid of the desktop, at least as a metaphor, or put it in a side mode like Dex is, you know, on a Samsung or something to that effect, that when you hooked it up to an external monitor, maybe you could enable it or something, you know.
The problem is this again. All right. people didn't understand why they couldn't. The Windows desktop with there, it looks
Right.
just like Windows that I've
But it
got on
didn't
my
work.
other
But it didn't
computer.
work
Why
like it.
can't I run
But-
my software on this machine?
Right.
So one last important thought is this may become something people would think about again once we get this new Qualcomm chip out there.
Maybe.
You know, with
Yeah.
ARM coming out and being a good amount of polish and power to it, it may well be that it's something people consider. Maybe some folks like Lenovo will try a
Maybe.
different form factor. Who knows? I don't know, but I'd love to see it again. I'd love to see it pushed and supported again. And yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to see a phone device again, but it won't happen. You know, there's no way it would happen again.
I
There's-
agree.
There's no value in Microsoft doing it now. I mean, it's way too late for that, but it still has impact on what we do today. We're still seeing things come out that people are doing that are related to what was done, you know, all those years ago on it. And people don't realize that it's still influencing decisions. It really is. It's fascinating in a lot of ways. And by the way, as a side note, some folks have even taken to running and installing flavors of Windows 11 on these old Nokia devices. So there's still a lot of playing around going on out there. So you never know.
Yep.
Very true. Very true. And there is an article, Chris, that you have written on this Windows Phone sort of retrospective look that will be coming out tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
On the
Cool.
site. So there you go, kids. Look for that particular article by Chris on the site coming tomorrow. It should post at about 6 a.m. So, or 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern. And that.
Do you get up that early, or does your computer blog?
My computer, or the server will go ahead and get.
Yeah,
up.
that's what I meant.
Yeah, I ain't getting up that early. So anyway, the kids, I would like to go ahead. That's effectively the show. And I want to go ahead and move us to our pick of the week segment. But before we go ahead and unleash the hounds there, I just want to take a moment and remind everyone that our show picks are typically hardware, software, and other items of interest that we have individually purchased and actually use, and that we like enough that we want to recommend them to you, our growing listener base. This is not any kind of a paid advertisement or any sort of thing that we have any kind of affiliated marketing relationship with. If that were the case, the editorial policy over at iTechGear.org indicates that we must let you know that up front. These are sincerely things that we believe in and that we want to bring to you at the end of each show. Why?
Because we like
you.
Yes. Yes, you guys make the site go post. So there you go. And Joel, you've got the pick this week. So what did you pick?
Okay. Well, yeah, y'all know I'm a amateur radio operator and have been.
You're a big ham.
In many ways than
bump.
one. But
my goodness,
one of the things that we like to do, other than talk on the radio, is listen to the radio. And
True.
one of the real, and it's really been, for me, it's been a lifelong love. I remember the summers listening to KDKA radio in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Out of Pittsburgh, yeah.
Yeah. Listening to the Pirates with my grandfather. And so not that this rekindles any of that kind of memory, because it really doesn't, because it's completely different kind of a device. One of the things that's getting really popular in amateur radio is software-defined radio. And it could be a one that transmits or one that listens, and today's is one that listens. The RTL SDR blog V3 R860 RTL 2832U. Really long name.
Only on Amazon. Only on Amazon will you find that name.
Right. Or Wish. But so this is a little USB dongle, has SMA a connector on one end where you would attach the antenna. The other end has a USB port, the male portion of the USB port. And you load this on your computer. You can use trying to remember when there's a software radio program both for Windows as well as Linux, and I don't know about the Mac.
No, it's Android. Android.
Android, I think.
Android also, Android also works on Android. There's many different programs you can use with this thing. In fact, actually, Android's one of my favorite platforms to use with this, because it's, so I can stick this in my bag when I'm traveling and then listen to both AM and shortwave as well. But that's not really the only thing that this thing can do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a flyer, like I fly on at least once a year now, I fly over to Virginia for a meeting, and you can plug this into your phone and use Avere ADSB as the name of the program on Android. And you can receive the ADSB transmissions on 1090 megahertz and basically watch the planes go overhead. It shows you their heading and what kind of plane it is and who it belongs to. That's just one of many things that you can do with this little dongle. CQR Sharp. If you go to the main website, rtlsdr.com, I think it's .com. Yeah, it's .com. It does have instructions for using SDR Sharp, which is it's a C# written application on Windows, and setting that up, and you can use it to, like I said, you can listen to AM, FM, upper sideband, lower sideband, all these different modulations, and so for only $43, which is just a phenomenal deal. It's probably not, I will say it's probably not as good as like if you bought like a Grundig or even a amateur radio, like most amateur radio HF rigs can receive out of band.
And you know what? Just to add something to what Joel's saying, and I'm also a ham, but Joel,
right.
As you remember, even if you went 20, 25 years ago, what you're seeing here for $43 would have been 430 minimum.
Easily. Yeah. I mean, the
technology
Grundig radio,
the price of our toys way down.
Yeah, a Grundig radio would have been $300 or $400 for sure for shortwave listening, and that's what this is going to be really great for. I think you can also do it may work with I haven't played around with it yet, but there's digital modes. There's one called FT8 on amateur radio. You probably receive those packets on this using software, or you can also receive the slow scan TV. For those who don't know what slow scan TV is basically we were sending pictures to each other wirelessly before there was an internet.
Right.
So that's essentially what it
sums it up.
But for $43, you can play around with this thing. It's a lot of fun. I'm not at the end of playing with this. They have a cheaper version of this kit that doesn't have all the accessories. I like this one because it had 2 lengths of dipole collapsible antennas, and it had a tripod as well as the Windows suction cup mount, which actually that's where the antenna is right now. And every once in a while at lunch, I'll fire it up, listen to radio on my lunch break. You can pick up local broadcast band. Better from where I tried that elsewhere in the house, didn't work so good, but once I put the antenna on the window, I was able to pick up the local 610 WTVN radio station, the local talk radio AM station here. So but like I said, $43, dude, you can do a lot of stuff with this thing. So if you're at all interested in radio, you don't have to have a license for this thing. It's really easy to pick up, and you'll have a lot of fun tuning around and seeing who you can listen to. That's it.
Very cool.
Sweet. Well, kids, that's the show. This has been the iTechGear Weekly, episode number 67. It's a color issue. Recorded live Sunday, November 12th, 2023, live from iTechGear Central. This is Christopher Spera, For Dr. Mr. Larry McJunkin, Mr. Chris Gavula, and Brother Joel McLaughlin, we will say see you next time.
Ba-boom.